Welcome back to the Tech Will Save Us podcast. This week we're talking about dyslexia, and I'm lucky enough to be joined by CEO of REYT, Mr. Jamie Hinton.
Well, great to be here.
Thank you. And Managing Director of REYT, Mr. Danny Tomalin.
Nice to be here, mate.
Now, I'm interested to hear sort of both your personal journeys with dyslexia. So starting with you then, Danny.
Yeah.
Do you remember the first time you sort of became aware that you might have dyslexia, or sort of the journey towards getting diagnosed?
Definitely, yeah. I think it was around when you're about 10, you're in year 5 at junior school. We had a topic on Greek mythology, and I really loved it. And then when you do parents' evening, your parents all come in. We got given like A5 books. There was nothing in my book, what was written, but there was lots of comments from the teacher saying, why haven't you done this bit, or why haven't you done that bit? But I love this topic, and if you ask me any questions about it, I'd be able to answer the question. And my mum and dad spoke with the teacher, and they were like, what's going on, Danny? You know this stuff. Are you lazy? Or you just can't do it in that way? I didn't know the answer to it. So for me, that was really confusing, I'd probably say. And then from there, that's kind of like the first warning sign of going, there might be something that we need to go and look at. And that's really where it began. And then from there, I went and did assessments and worked out, oh yeah, he's dyslexic. And these are the things that you're really good at. These are the things that you maybe need to improve on, or areas that focus on the good things. Probably is more of it. And yeah, that was all between 10 and 12. So I worked out where that was.
And Jamie, was it a similar story for you, around the same age?
No, it was actually quite a lot earlier.
Right.
So, you know, when you're this little kid and you're in bed and you're being read a story, I was very lucky to be had stories read to me. And it was like Meghan Mogg. And then you...
Classics.
Oh,
I read it yesterday.
Classics, yeah, still read it.
They are fantastic books. And I remember sort of being read them. You don't remember everything as a kid, but you remember how you feel. And that's where the emotions are really seated. And I remember being read to, and then I was asked, could you read? And I was bloody good. But I wasn't reading. I could recite it. But as soon as you had to go off piece, or you were asked to read other bits and pieces or writing, I just absolutely hated it. It was so difficult. And my mum actually spotted it at quite a young age and started to, I suppose, deal with it. This is back in the 80s, showing my age a little bit, and it wasn't really a thing. You were basically just stupid. Because school just assesses you on one type of intelligence, which is that academia intelligence, but that's not all the intelligences there are. And luckily for me, my mum had spotted it and thought there was something that needed to be done, so I was assessed again at quite a young age and highlighted. And the other thing that really happened, I suppose I was so lucky, was that my mum didn't want it to be a thing at school, so you weren't, like, I suppose, labelled as stupid or idiotic, or you were maybe a bit slow at doing certain things. So one of the things my mum actually said to me was, you don't have learning difficulties, you have learning differences. I was like, So these little nudges and these little sayings actually put you on a totally different trajectory. And from that, I actually had extra tuition outside of school, never inside of school. And it was really hard though, because people do still, treat you in a certain way, or you're challenged in, delivering what is expected of you at school. But it didn't stop you in the long run.
And did you, Danny, have a similar experience of sort of navigating through school with the same sort of challenges as Jamie's just described?
Yeah, definitely. You want to fit in, don't you, when you're at school? That is one of the... Being different, you stand out in them places, and I think being dyslexic was definitely a thing that tried to hide a lot of the time from stuff. You can't hide it from your tests. You get the result, I was one of the ones that kind of fell in that below average on the academic grading score. So then you just get put in the bottom sets of how you go through, and the problem with that is you lose options. So when I actually got to year 9, the things that actually interested me, which were the more creative things, like your art, your product design, manufacturing stuff, we weren't allowed to do it. It was grayed out on our options list. And I remember thinking, why can't I have, these are the things that I actually love and want to do. And I remember going to the head of year's office and just banging on the door. I've always been a bit like that, if you want to go straight to the person. So I banged on the door and I said, I really want to do product design, I really want to do art. Is there any way that I can move up the set? This is me, maybe 13, 14. It took a lot of guts to go to these people and say that. They went, let's get your mum in, and your mum can come in. So my mum came in, chatted to them, kind of agreed to put me up into the class. And then my head of year spoke to me and said, do you want to do French or German? Not really. I want to do product design, I want to do art, I want to do manufacturing. Well, if you don't want to do languages, then I can't really move you up, Danny, sorry. I was like, right, so that means that I can't do all these good things. But when you couple that with being in the lower end of the sets, how my school worked, we had 4 bands. There was only 3 bands that were truly talked about. And then there was this 4th band, that's where I was in. And with that, you had to do lessons like career planning, 2 hours every Wednesday where you worked out your CV, and you had another lesson for an hour which was called supported studies, where the idea was you could get coupled with a teacher and do your homework. You don't get homework when you're in bottom sets. It just doesn't come. I spent ages with my mum arguing with me about, where's your homework? You're not bringing it home. So I did all that sort of stuff and got into there, and I actually used to Skype them lessons and go do the art and go do the product design stuff instead, because that's where...
You sound like Steve Jobs.
That's where my interest lied. I don't think it's that. I just didn't want to be around people who weren't doing anything. It's like I wanted to get better. I wanted to keep going and doing things that I enjoyed doing, and wasting my time is writing my CV every week. So sometimes you just have to take control of your own learning and make it, that's the route I'm going.
Well, you become a sum of the people you spend your time with.
Exactly, yeah.
And that's sometimes not a good thing, or it can be a good thing.
Yeah.
So choose them wisely.
Absolutely. It sounds quite restrictive. What are would you say, the common sort of misconceptions about dyslexia then?
That we can't
Where do we start? Stupid, slow, stupid, slow,
stupid,
can't
and slow.
count, can't add up. I think there's that misconception that, like I said before, just because you're not you're not great in terms of one intelligence set, you're awful on all of them. And I think it's something that needs to change. Actually, that you are literally wired up differently, and that's okay. Actually, that's great. This is not something to be a detriment. This is something you should embrace and go, that's brilliant, and then fall into those things and do those things that you're wired up to be brilliant at. So they say you can put people in a brain scanner and you can actually tell what type of disposition they have. Now, one of the things I hear is when people go, if they've got autism, you're an amazing software developer. Why? That's nonsense. Absolutely nonsense. You didn't fall out of your mother's womb and go, oh, I can write code. I've got autism.
Danny did.
There's a correlation, not a causation. So if you think about it, people who have autism generally, and then this is me with broad brushes, are not great in social situations. They can't read people very well, they can't read the room very well, all that sort of stuff. So they usually try and avoid them. Now this is me talking in generality, so what happens? You go in your room and you find computers and you go and practice that and you get very good at it. It's not because you've got autism that you're very good at computer programming, it's because you've avoided all the other things and you've gone and found a computer and gone, this is great, and practiced at it and got very good at it. That's the same with dyslexia. Now, if I said to Danny, were you friends with the dinner ladies at school?
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. And so Dave Cutney, you go and ask him, he's got, MD, he's got dyslexia. Say, Dave, were you really friendly with the dinner ladies? And he goes, yeah, how did you know? It's like, it's a bit of a weird
I never knew that as a thing. I always had a mantra, look after the people who make you tea. Almost. You get bigger portions.
Did it for your belly?
Yeah,
but you always get extra sausage.
I didn't realise it was. I didn't realise that it was actually.
But it's not literally dinner ladies. It's not like you've got dyslexia and dinner ladies are like your friends. It's when you go to school, the first days you go to school and you're 4 years old, you realise that there's something that's a bit different, but you don't know, you can't put your finger on it. Yeah. So what happens is you have to start getting skills or nurturing skills to get people to help you.
Yes.
And what happens is you get very, very good at getting people on side. A lot of people with dyslexia have a high likability. People just like them because they've worked out this is how you do it. You listen to them, you ask them questions. It's the full How to Make Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. It's like, oh yeah, because I'm dyslexic, I had to do that. But you don't realise what's happening. But you do it with the dinner ladies. And then you actually get extra sausages. But you're doing it all over the shop. You have to canvass the teacher to help you to do this thing. You have to canvass the person next to you to give you a bit of time. Or you learn all these other skill sets, but you don't realise you're doing it. The more you practice something, the better you get.
And you never realise that this is dyslexia that's helping. This is just, that's you know, from your perspective, like, this is just how Danny operates.
This
or
is just
how
you, yeah.
Jamie does his thing, and Jamie's good with people. Okay, but like, it's just
But
a Jamie
why?
trait, yeah. But why?
And you
is
go
that?
back and you understand the history and go, that's.
And that's where I think it's
interesting.
interesting when people talk about the soft and hard skills of stuff, because I think dyslexia, people with dyslexia, we have a tendency to grow them soft skills earlier than other people. It's not saying no one can obtain them. It's just we find it easier on that life because we find these harder ones actually harder in that way. But I'd argue that the soft ones are what normal people kind of look at as going. The soft skills are actually the harder ones. So quite hard skills you can teach them because there's loads of books there, there's loads of documents that you can look through. If you're dyslexic, you need to understand it from me. Sometimes I need to understand it from you as the expert. Tell me about this thing. I can get into the weeds of it, I can ask you good questions to kind of pull out that information. But if you just gave me a set of documents, said read them, they're going to take a lot of chewing to get down. It's just a different way we take information in.
It's interesting about the hard and soft skills. I wonder how it sort of affects or influences your creativity as well.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the brain, like I said, the brain is actually wired differently. Put people in brain scanners and you can go autism, normal, whatever normal is, dyslexia, and obviously there's a whole range of these different things. So you put someone who has autism, you can see the neurons, they actually go down quite deep, and that aligns to deep focus. It's a superpower. That's their superpower. And I'm very envious of that because I can't really do it. Normal people are about there. What's weird is dyslexic people like this. Now, when it comes to creativity, it enables you to just think very differently. Dyslexic, again, we're talking in, this is how people are. It's not. It's a very broad brushstroke. But generally, dyslexic people can do logic A, B, C, D, E, F, and get to the solution of whatever. But really, they go A, cat, chicken, carpet, lamp. It's full on lateral thinking, like the whole Edward de Bono's lateral thinking, and that comes with some creativity. And you couple that with this ability to visualize things at a high level, and you've got something really powerful. So dyslexic people usually can walk in like from a strategic perspective and go, "Oh, you need to do that, then this and that." And, oh God, I can't see. How do you see that? It's obvious, isn't it? And again, there's a common trait of being able to do that. So you couple that with the lateral thinking, the creativity, and this ability to get people on side. It's a total and utter superpower. It should never be thought of as something that is a detriment. You can brute force reading, you can brute force writing. You just have to do it a lot.
Yeah.
And you build up other mechanisms around it. Children should never be thought that this is actually a bad thing. If, one of my kids they're really badly dyslexic, I'd be like, wicked, yeah.
Happy days.
Weirdos.
We know what we're doing with this.
No one who's ever done anything epically brilliant in the world has ever been normal. They've always been weirdos. They've always been the outcasts. They've always been the different thinkers. And this is just one way of doing it. Autism is the same. Dyslexia, they're just different ways of looking at it. So I think I just want to encourage people to go, actually look at it as a good thing, reframe it, as the Stoics would say, and actually go, this is a real advantage.
So we've spoken a little bit about autism there, and often in the neurodivergent community, they'll do a lot of masking. Is that ever something that you guys have been aware of or found yourself slipping into? With
Probably
dyslexia?
not slipping into them, being like consciously aware of it. I think there's a thing around being almost a chameleon when it comes to the art of people in that way, or wanting to connect with people. You might lean into a bit more of their characteristics or go against it if you need to. But I think that was definitely a thing of going, I just want to fit in with you for a bit, especially in that early days. And then I suppose one of the biggest masking coping mechanisms at school were just don't tell anybody. And then they just won't know. They'll just think, you're shit at reading in that way. And then, I thought that was mainly it. Now, it's very much different. It's something I'm actually proud to be.
It's the first thing you tell everyone, isn't it, Danny?
Exactly, yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
Danny.
I am Danny. I am dyslexic. That is
So get over it.
Everybody knows that now. But it's one of the. I am proud of it. It's a badge that I wear. We honour almost. And I know that it's probably, if you went back, it's the foundational secret sauce of why I've done what I've done.
It's really hard to mask though. I mean, who came up with the term dyslexia? I mean, were they doing it just to wind you up? Dylexic. I mean, God, it's so hard to spell, isn't it? But I think at a young age, you like Danny says, you just want to be part of the gang. You don't want to be ridiculed. So when it comes to, when you were had to read in a class, and Little House on the Prairie is possibly the worst book, and I hate it. If someone presented me with one, I'd probably burn it. I absolutely hate it with a huge vengeance. Go and read this book over the summer. I would rather jab a fork in my face and then come and read this chapter in front of everyone. It was awful. Now, because it's not something that's that obvious, so if we had people who had maybe had a stutter in our class, but they didn't have to read very much and no one laughed because they had to respect. But here's the dyslexic kid that no one really knows what's going on, because you don't go, hi, I've got this stamp on my head, I'm a dyslexic, dylexic, yeah, great. And you had to read this thing, and it was just the most difficult thing. It's like, you know when you're typing, and you can just type away when no one's watching, and then someone comes and stands next to you, you just go, oh God. And then 3 people, and you're like, oh my God, I can't type. That's what happens multiple times when you're trying to read, and you think this is easy and it's flowing in your own head, but then when you have to read it out, it's like, oh my God. And it's possibly, I can even feel the emotions now of embarrassment, and it's very hard to mask it when it's in public. Like I said about Meg and Mog, I'd already read it and I could recite it, so you mask away. But this is where those traits of getting other people to help, you're masking it by just getting someone else to help you. You're masking it by asking the teacher for a little bit more time or a little bit more advice on X, Y, and Z. Or you're masking it on, oh, what you do. Mm-hmm. So there are all these things that are going on, but there's only a point, up until a point you can't mask it at all. It is what it is, and you just got to accept it. Now I don't mask it, I couldn't give a monkeys.
It's funny as well, because even when you get to the reading, you are a confident kid. Do you know, in that way? You can talk really well, you can tell stories really well. So sometimes when it gets to that hard reading bit, it's like, why can't Danny do that bit? He's just talked to me the story beforehand, or he's just answered me. They know how to do it, and it's just that brain does not compute word.
I think the story thing though is actually really interesting, because that is one of the masking traits you can have. You can distract. Mm-hmm. It's not masking, you go, oh, look at the monkey over here, I'll tell you a story. And I find it really interesting when it comes to these days, children are taught all sorts about grammar and how words and what they mean and imperfect case. I'm like, I don't really know. My 9-year-old son knows more about it than I do, and I think it's just mad. But what really matters, is it the story or how the grammar is right? We're really good at the stories, and I've got an interesting life because we've had to do all sorts of different things to get around things. So have you got something interesting to say and an interesting story? Can you paint it in such a very vivid and beautiful way, rather than a man had a dog? Well, there's this man, right? And he had this dog, and this dog was... do you see what I mean? Have something interesting to say and say it in an interesting way is more important than has it got a dot there or a word. Who cares? Who cares?
My dad was dyslexic as well, so it wasn't a surprise when we kind of became it. And he's always...
Became it?
Well, became it.
Danny
Yeah, but you're not born with that. You're not born with it.
Well, you are.
You are. It's that first 2 years, the first early stage of your life.
Why not differently?
Not like the minute you come out of the womb, you know. You have that...
when you're coded.
You have the primitive reflexes that you shed over like the very first early years. And that's why we might crawl. It's why we have temper tantrums when we're 2. It's because your body's learning how to connect your dots together. I spoke to my dad this week because I knew we were coming to do this, and just asked, he wrote weird when I was a baby. And he went, you never crawled. You literally one day went from your bum and then just stood up and went.
That's Danny Tomalin.
Yeah, I'll skip that bit.
That's a trend that's continued throughout your career.
Just skip them bits. And then when I actually went to get my assessment done, it was a lady who specialised in Alexander technique, and she was the one who went, did he crawl? I went, actually, no, he didn't. It wasn't a big deal to mum and dad at the time. It was quite impressive that I didn't do it. But then it made sense that hand-eye coordination might not be there. And people, have you ever heard of dyspraxia? Mm. So dyspraxia and dyslexia, they actually go hand in hand, but people think they're miles apart because one's a physical thing, your hand and your eyes aren't matching up. But if you put that into the world of reading, if our hands and our eyes can't coordinate, when we scan a book, we don't look that way. We might go, because our eyes aren't joined up at the same time.
That's why they use the rulers to read on the line.
Yeah, and like one of the biggest pains in my ass has been dyslexic. I had to do exercises every day to try and learn them reflexes, so this was me. It was embarrassing. I mean, my mum used to sit me down, my mum sat me down on this recliner chair, not recliner chair, wheeler chair, an office chair. I had to sit like that, and she had to spin me round a quarter, tap me on my shoulder, and spin me back, come back round. And if you think about it, the course she gave me was 40 weeks. What else happens in 40 weeks? A pregnancy can happen, and the way that you learn in your mum's womb, the fact that the baby might turn over. And we only realised this a couple of years later. That's what that lady was doing. She gave us exercises to help us shed them primitive reflexes. So I was 12. I actually went through my terrible twos at 12 and got really angry at that time. Nothing to do with like what naturally happens at 12. It was because of them. I was experiencing them emotions that you experience when you were 2 later on. But we saw a massive difference in my dyslexia after that. Improvement on other areas.
It's very interesting.
Yeah. It's crazy when you get into it, like the psychology behind it all and stuff, yeah.
That's really interesting. When did you have your terrible twos, Jamie?
At 2. Yeah.
So it's just a Danny,
still haven't it?
Danny big
43.
weird thing. Yeah.
Yeah, started last week.
Yeah.
You touched on your experiences at school. Just wondering from your guys' perspective, what can schools and employers, I suppose, do differently to encourage a more inclusive environment for people with dyslexia?
I think it's understand that we do think differently. I know like the standardised test thing, it's not an easy one to change, but they don't work for everybody in that way.
Oh, just change whole
just
schooling
change the way
generally.
it's done, yeah. Like if dyslexia have this ability to connect in that sort of way a bit earlier, then pin them as a bit more of a leader in that group, help them get the right people together, because I know Jamie's definitely the same as me, is we care about the person first before we care about what your skill set is. We want to get to know you, and that's where I think it might be personal practice with that stuff, but definitely from like a core trait of it, it's like we're good at bringing people together, so let us lead them things. Let us create the groups. We know how to get the best out of the people in the group who are better than us at all them other hard skill stuff.
It's the synergy.
So let us be ones that bring stuff together a bit more, and let us know it's okay as well. You know, tell us what we're good at earlier. That's probably a good
I think the messaging needs to be different. If I ever hear anyone say you've got a learning difficulty, straight away you need to change that message, because that is one thing. It's that the whole Carol Dweck's mindset thing. You might not be good at it yet. The messages we tell children matter, especially at a young age. So if we say you don't have learning difficulties, you have learning differences. You can do this, you can brute force it, but you have other skill sets. This is a superpower, not something that's to be sort of negative. And if I could have a little magic wand, I'd change the whole education system completely, because it only looks at one intelligence set. And that is not how the human is.
Did you ever see that poet that talks about school, and his first line's been like, if you treat a fish on its ability to climb trees, it'll go all over its life thinking it's a loser.
Yeah. Don't get a squirrel to go swimming.
Like, would you get David Beckham to do single moth threat detection? You're not doing it, are you? You're not going to get a scientist to curve a ball really well. Play us to our strengths, play us to our differences, let us offset each other, and together we'll do it, you know?
So we have been speaking with the University Technical College, and we've told the students that you guys, the illustrious duo that you are coming into the show, and they've given us a couple of questions that they'd like a few answers for. So
awesome.
Let's go. So the first one then, how did you overcome the impact of reading slower when taking exams or doing class activities?
That's a great question.
Great question.
I got extra time at times. I don't know the tip of it, if I'm honest with you. It just took a bit of extra work. I used to have one of them screen things, which sometimes helped with the contrast, but didn't quite help me read across. But ask for more time. Like, you have to rinse it. If you know you're bad at them weaknesses, you have to try and get all the support you can get for stuff. If you're going down that route of saying, this test is going to define the rest of my life if I don't pass this thing, because it won't. But if you really want to do that, then try and get the extra time that you need.
Alright, okay, so I didn't have all the technology when I was doing it. I'm really old, so yeah. However, there are the little tips in terms of reading. Is obviously the ruler underneath the bit of copy, and actually just take your time, because you're not actually that slow. And read it multiple times, and almost make a note to yourself, this is the question that I'm being asked. So always know what the goal is. Always come back to how I answered the question. Because I tell my children this, I think because the education system is the way it is, they've told you the rules, play to those rules. Don't try and learn everything. Don't try and read everything. Only learn the bits that actually they're going to question you on. So learn the 20% that gets you 80% of the thing. Play them by their own game. If they're going to start giving you this whole academia, this is how we want you to, answer questions, just do exactly what they ask and just rock on. I think nowadays, in terms of the revision and learning, you can, what's great like Google, if I'm going to say this in the room, it might set me off. Okay, Google, read this to me, or read me this page. It's great, and then put it on high speed. You can read it multiple times and just make your notes on it. There's loads of ways around it, and ask people not to actually write all in capitals because that's probably the hardest thing. But use technology to your advantage. Use ChatGPT when you're learning to revise. Just whack all that content in there and ask it to summarise it for you, and then go read it out to me, because you can use technology to do that.
I use that all the time.
That's a really good tip.
I always write stuff out and then give it to ChatGPT. Sort my spelling, sort my grammar.
GTP, PGT,
GPT,
GTP.
yeah. I always ask it to do that stuff for just them things that are just going to take me so long.
Embrace the new tools, right?
Absolutely.
It's gonna be helpful.
Use them to your advantage. We've got an unfair advantage these days, especially in the amazing culture that we live in. We're very, very privileged that we actually have access to these things. So use them to your advantage. But the thing in the exams, my thing is go really slowly on those bits. Understand what the question is. You don't need loads of time to write stuff. Actually, I know sometimes they go, you've got to write at least this many words. But if you've got the answers nailed and you've got something, again, really good to say, does it matter how long it is? Really? If you've answered it and nailed it, do that. Make your life easy.
Excellent. Great advice. So the second question then, and this is a good one.
Is it?
It's a very
brace.
good one.
Go on, I'm ready.
Do you find it an advantage working in an industry as you can see problems in a different way to people who are atypical?
100%. Definitely. Like most of my stuff I used to do was workshops, and the amount of times that people would pose challenges and do that, and you kind of go, we could try this. Oh, can we try that? How did you come up with that? I'm not sure, it just came straight to me when we went to that, and then we spent ages trying to work that out. But 100%, it is your ability to connect dots quicker than most in that way. It definitely sets you apart. It doesn't have to be necessarily in technology. You'll probably be able to apply the same skill sets to any industry, but yeah, it's definitely an advantage.
Yeah, I think one of the, they actually have highlighted specific skill sets that people with dyslexia have an advantage, and there's the visualization thing. And we're not just talking, yes, I can visualize this space. Yes, that is definitely something you can do, but you can visualize whole roadmaps. You can visualize ways of doing things. You can zoom out. You're really good at just going to 50,000 feet. It's obvious it's that.
I remember once me and Jimmy were on a walk, and I said to Jimmy, can you visualize a floor layout of a house and actually feel the walls around you and move it in your head? And he's like, yeah, I can. I'm like, oh good, I'm glad it's not just me.
Yeah, that matters. But if you think about that plus the other bits and pieces you've got, you actually can use it to be a rather good leader. You can canvas people. You can tell those stories. You can see big visions. Visionaries are few and far between, and we need more of them. So you can really use this to your advantage. It doesn't have to be in technology. It's probably best not even in technology. I mean, I was doing this when it wasn't cool. It's a weird industry to be in, but it can apply to pretty much everything and anything.
I think where it helps as well in tech, in particular, is the skills that the jobs that you might be training for now will be different when you actually get into the place of work. But having them core skills, you're really to see through problems, being able to ask great questions, connect with people. That's what's going to get you the job for the futures.
Oh God, yeah. Problem solving, because I tell my kids, I'm just teaching them how to solve problems, but also identify problems. And I think that's one of the skill sets that dyslexic people have, because they can zoom out, they can see the bigger picture, and they can see that's not your problem. That's it. Now, computers aren't going to be able to do that still I don't believe, for quite a long time. And like Danny says, the future is going to be very, very different. So don't anchor yourself into trying to solve the problem right now with the skill sets, because what's going to be down the line is going to be very different.
It's a really powerful point, and I want to thank the UTC students for giving these questions, because I've got another classic. I've got another one. How do you deal with assumptions and common misconceptions with your abilities in relation to dyslexia? your own dyslexia?
I think that's one that has to come with time. You grow confidence with it. I think you learn to front things a lot easier. You start to laugh at yourself a bit more as well. Go, yeah, it's cool. I'm really good at that stuff. Let's not worry about this bit. Do you know, in that way? Yeah.
It's so much easier though when you can go, well, you've already achieved it, and you've already been recognised. In the early days when you're at school, it's very hard because you've got nothing. You've got no gravitas. You can't go, well, I've done all these other things, so who cares? So it's so easy for us to say now and go, no, I've already made it and I've gotten through that adversity and yeah, whatever. And you all know that didn't really matter, did it? So I think that is a challenge.
I think it might be something about, for me, I've only ever done things that I love to do. It's like I've never, like the career advisor didn't give us like a path that I followed. It was more, I was kind of interested in where does that path sort of take you? And when you follow your own interest instead of you'll learn all the other stuff that comes with it. That's where your practice starts to come into it. Because it's not like, hey, I've got dyslexia, that means I can do all this stuff. You have to decide, you have to put effort into getting there. And then through doing that, you go, I'm actually really good at that avenue. You go down that path then. And it's okay to turn back round and go down another if you think you did it wrong.
I think it's actually worth noting that there's no one in the world who's as good at being you as you.
That's exactly it.
And just embrace that and just go, I love being quirky, I love being different, and it doesn't really matter. Who cares?
That's
a great message. I know.
Yeah, it is.
Where are the tissues, Jamie?
I didn't say it either.
You did say it. Do you have any final pieces of advice or messages for young people with dyslexia? I mean, that was a pretty good one that you just gave there, wasn't it?
I think it is what Jamie just said, really. But just play to your strengths.
Mm-hmm.
It's fine to have weaknesses in areas. Identify and know what they are. Find people around you who can offset them weaknesses. But just be yourself.
But know thyself.
Yeah.
There's that whole old adage, and I don't think people really take it to heart. It's the old phrases are usually the best ones. Surround yourself with great people. Get out of their way. Or, you are some of the people you spend your time with. And I think, know thyself, know where your strengths are, know where your weaknesses are. Believe that the reading, you can brute force it. I got very, very good at it just because I wanted to.
If you apply,
I did more than that. I did 57 actually.
What's this year's target? 60?
I don't know, because it's turned into a habit now. It's a behaviour. It's just, I don't even count. It doesn't matter. But I think if you believe that you can do these things and you take away the negative messages you tell yourself, I'm not very good at this, I believe you're not going to be very good at it. Believe that if you put your effort in, you can, I sound like blooming Dot Brown. If you put your mind to it, you can do anything. And I think you can. Read interesting things that actually you can action upon. Like, go and get an audiobook of Dr. Carol Dweck's Mindset. It'll change your world. And peak performance, where you can actually understand if you do purposeful practice, you can make anything happen. So be hopeful and optimistic of the future. Focus on where your skill sets are. If you want to get better at something else, you can do it. You just have to really dig in and brute force it.
Excellent. Well, that feels like a really good place to finish things. It's been great speaking to you both, and it's been a really important conversation to have. So Danny, thank you very much. And Jamie, thank you for your time, and thanks for watching.